Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate and review us wherever you get a podcast at, and follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways. I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms. Joining me, as always, are the millions of voices inside my head. No, I'm just kidding. It's just me today. Kind of a last minute thing that popped up. Something came up in Mike's schedule, and to be honest, a little bit of a slower news week. So it kind of worked out that I would just kind of hop on myself here and talk about some stuff. Kind of one of those episodes that I usually like to say. I'm still shopping a name around and trying to figure something out. Workshopping a name. That's what I was trying to think. Words and stuff. They're hard. Trying to figure out what I want to call these episodes that I just hop on and just bullshit and whatnot, and kind of an airing of grievances, if you want to say, or just airing the thoughts in my head kind of thing, with what's going on in the games industry and whatnot. But anywho, just going to be one of those episodes today. Since it's a quiet news week, I figured to talk about a couple of things that kind of popped up in the news and what I've been playing and whatnot. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it for this week. These intros are always really weird because I always want to kick it over to somebody, and I'm not going to kick it over to my alternate personality or something like that. And, that's for my therapist to talk about. But in all seriousness, no. I was trying to think of, I'm like, what all am I going to talk about this week, considering even whenever Mike was getting ready to get on the show, we'll talk about, we'll touch on, obviously, the, Microsoft announcing for sure. It's not only, obviously, they're doing another summer showcase that is typically what would be their E3 presser, that they confirmed yes, they are doing another one, but also too that they're once again sharing it with Bethesda, still giving Bethesda its namesake and whatnot. That was announced today. We'll talk about that for a little bit, but being a little bit slow over news day, I was even kind of struggling, like, fuck, what's going to be our topic this week? What are we going to, but lo and behold, it just gives me the opportunity to just kind of do something that I'm not going to put words in Mike's mouth, because he's played it with me. Trust me, he's played the game with me. We've had a good time playing it, whether he wants to say it or not. We've had a good time playing in groups with this game. I am, though, obviously much more of the bigger fan of this game, but this is now my opportunity to talk some shop in terms of Overwatch, specifically Overwatch 2, the beta. Yes, that's right. I got in, got to play a couple days ago, so we're recording this on Thursday. So yeah, earlier this week, got to hop in and play that. And I'll be quite honest, the best way that I can phrase a lot of this, like I said, Mike's not the biggest Overwatch guy. So to say the least, this gives him the opportunity. He lucked out in not having to sit here and listen to me talk about it. And I don't want to say gush, because let me get into it, I guess. For those who are, and obviously I'm talking about what I'm playing this week at this point, but for those of you who are into Overwatch, this isn't kind of anything new, but I think to the mass populace, what most people see and I think expect traditionally from Activision and their quote-unquote live service games, because Overwatch is obviously a live service game, but Overwatch 2 is going to have a campaign and stuff like that. It will be a new package of some sort. But I think a lot of people are expecting something a little different from this game, and expect what to get from this. In all honesty, Overwatch 2 is a glorified update. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it is very, there's a negative connotation, I guess, to that. So I don't want to say a glorified, but it is basically a very big update to Overwatch. Because if you are playing Overwatch 1, you're going to be able to play people, and you're going to also be able to play with people who own Overwatch 2. And that was very much a Jeff Kaplan thing from my understanding before he left. Obviously, that was something he kind of died on the sword for, from what I hear about it. And who knows with, the acquisition by Microsoft or the pending one, which we'll actually talk about. There's some news on that too. But it is very untraditional to, and this is, like I said, this is probably old news to a lot of people who are in the know with Overwatch and whatnot. But in terms of Activision, it's very obviously traditionally against how they do. They are very much hey, we are the traditional, up until obviously being bought by Microsoft or in the process of it, we are a very traditional, large-scale, third-party AAA publisher. As in, we are all about moving numbers. We're all about the high ship numbers, high sales rates. We're all about, moving units and having player and flaunting sales records, flaunting user counts, all that. And that's what, obviously, too, whenever they had the partnership with and were publishing Destiny, that was always the big thing that you heard about. And one of the big reasons that it sounds like, from what everything that's come out with Bungie and whatnot, since they're split from Activision, that the big thing was there wouldn't have been a Destiny 2 if Activision wasn't around. We'd still have Destiny would still be ongoing, where there wouldn't be that split. And that was very much a Activision push that they wanted it, because they are ready for, hey, we want the 2 or whatever it was, a 3-year cycle on the game, and then we're going to pop out a second one, and then another 3 years on that. That's how they get their 10-year plan. And from the dev side, they were all, from everything I've understood from what's come out and whatnot, that they were obviously very against that, because that does segment your player base and whatnot, and but it hurts the trajectory of Destiny in terms of keeping it one cohesive thing. You look at so many of the games that are out there now that are live service based, especially ones that are massively online, massive multiplayer games like Destiny, like World of Warcraft, like Final Fantasy 14. Games like that you don't see direct follow-ups to traditionally. You'll see expansions and whatnot, like we did see with Destiny, but we didn't see one straight out of the box like, hey, boom, this is it. We're not getting a World of Warcraft 2. We're not getting, something like that where it's like, we got to worry about that. It's always one of the things that you hear about with Destiny that, oh, that wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had, Destiny 2 come out and whatnot. But I think this was kind of the compromise, and I think this will be Jeff Kaplan's kind of lasting effect on the Overwatch scene now that he is, no longer on Overwatch and with Blizzard. That I think this will be his kind of fingerprint on the franchise, as long as they kind of keep it that way. That it was his way of keeping Overwatch a cohesive unit and the player base a cohesive, just like one streamlined thing as much as possible, kind of meeting in the middle, obviously with Activision, because I'm sure they were hard-nosed on that as well, of, hey, no, we want an Overwatch 2. Okay, well, how can we make this, which, as somebody who's been a long-time Overwatch player, the game has seen ups and downs, to say the least, in terms of, hell, player count alone, and activity and interest in the game and whatnot. When you have such a big game that fluctuates like that in the interest, but also at the same time has a very rabid fan base that loves it, and especially too, Blizzard fans in general, they are passionate. They are unlike any breed of fans that there are. I like to say, I akin them to, that you rarely see. Like it's to the point now where I think, and for such a long time, you see it. The only thing close to it really right now, outside of, in terms of just love and affection, I think, for whether that's love and affection sometimes in a hard way too, like we've been seeing with everything that's come out with Activision and whatnot, and the shitty things that have also happened with J. Allen Brack and whatnot, that the hard love that comes with that as well. But really the fervor that goes with that fan base, it's almost really the only one that I think comes close to it is Final Fantasy XIV, and that is in a much different category too. That's apples and oranges. But in terms of the passion that comes along with that, I mean, I think that's the closest you can really get to just a specific world, or, you know, worlds, I guess, or universe, if you want to call it. But anyways, kind of getting into the game alone. I know that's the long-winded way of saying Overwatch 2 is basically just a big update to Overwatch and kind of the history on that, but whatnot. Kind of my top level thoughts. I haven't played, and I plan to, the beta's going until end of next week, I want to say. So I'll have much more cohesive thoughts. These are very much this is my first takes, my initial impression kind of thing. Not, you know, obviously I'm not going to review the beta, but I think I'll have a better feel of the game and where the game's headed and what the game is looking like. Because from what it sounds like, we're obviously going to have more betas coming up here soon as well. But because this game is obviously not coming out right away. But very much it feels... How do I want to put this? This feels like a very tempered first step, kind of, where it very much feels like you're playing Overwatch 1, because it is still a lot of the same, you know, framework and things like that that are going into this game. But it feels, even just in the beta alone, and sure, there are some things that need to be tuned a little bit better and whatnot, mechanically, this game feels as fine-tuned as it's been in a long time. And I think that's because the Overwatch team has been so heads down, and we've seen, obviously, outside of a few different small events that come out and whatnot, an anniversary and whatnot, like, that you'll get throughout the year, it has been very much I don't want to say timid, or it's been a very much silent approach to their communication in terms of what's going on outside of, you know, maintenance and things like that to the game, because it is still widely popular in terms of its, you know, we're looking at one of the few major esports that take a franchise approach similar to North American pro sports, where we see, you know, cities and locations that have their own teams. Like, this is a very popular game still. While it might not be doing Fortnite numbers and whatnot, though we can get into the fact that, what was the number? I think it was like, I'm going to pull it up now just so I don't sound like a complete ass. But I want to say it was like 300,000 people watching Overwatch. Here, let me pull up. Christian Angelis over at IGN with the write-up. Oh, here we go. In honor of the sequel beta, several high-profile Twitch streamers such as Lyric, Myth, and most notably XQC streamed the first Overwatch. The game peaked at around 450,000 views today, and XQC's amassed over 150,000 views of Overwatch on his own, which is a big thing to kind of point out, and I'm glad that, you know, not that obviously Christian wouldn't obviously know this or whatever, but a lot of times when people look at streaming numbers, especially too with, and I'm glad Christian pointed that out, that a lot of times when you go on, like I'm going on Twitch right now, and you could potentially see, you know, under, like if you're just browsing games, you could see a game pop up, like, granted, there's obviously people have played this more, you know, you'll usually see more people, but like, there's a lot of people who speedrun like Ocarina of Time or something. But right now I click on browse, and Ocarina of Time is in the top like 10 games in terms of viewer count right now, because you click on it and there's a stream of somebody with thousands of views, one stream, 1,000 views, kind of pumping that number up. Not that Overwatch does that, because it is a game with a professional player base and, all along that. But how do I want to explain? I think it really benefited from people like XQC, specifically XQC, somebody who played this game professionally at one point, was considered one of the best tank players at one point, and obviously had his fair share of controversies, and that's obviously not what the point I'm trying to make, but somebody who has a massive fan base, and somebody who has tons of pull, and somebody who is intrinsically tied to this game, and forever will be, probably, that he is, out there streaming it, and streaming it pretty consistently. He was streaming it multiple nights. He was streaming it not for just, hey, I'm partnered with Blizzard on this one, and yada yada. I even popped in to watch him play for a little bit, and as somebody who watched him more because I'm a Dallas Fuel fan, burn blue, baby. But knowing him originally from when he played for the Dallas Fuel, and kind of, seeing his streams and stuff like that around that time, him being very abrasive, to say the least, while playing Overwatch, when the kind of bottom was falling out and he was kind of moving away from Overwatch to become a variety streamer in general, demeanor was very different, from at least what I was picking up, that he even seems to be enjoying the game a decent bit, at least where it's headed right now with Overwatch 2. But like I'm saying, it feels like it's trending in the direction of the most polished feel of Overwatch that we've seen in a long time. And that's great, because this is a game that needs something like that. It needs consistency. That's the biggest thing with Overwatch, I think, that it struggled with over the past couple of years, is the consistency. Blizzard has so many irons in the fire that it sometimes, I think, is inevitable that something is going to fall between the cracks. And I think for a game like Overwatch that is a consistent game, it is a game that, in terms of that it's consistently going. Like, it is a game that is a live service game. It's always on, always playing. It's sometimes hard to keep up with that when you have also, at the same time, one of the biggest games ever that is still ongoing, and now in its it's gonna be 18th year in World of Warcraft, and you have an incredible amount of people playing that game still, and that's not going away anytime soon. Not to mention, on top of that, you're also overseeing Call of Duty, because we're talking Activision as well, but you're overseeing Call of Duty, not to mention Warzone on top of that, that you have so many irons in the fire. And realistically, if you want to be technical, two versions of World of Warcraft out there, and World of Warcraft and World of Warcraft Classic. But between the state of Call of Duty with Warzone and Vanguard, I guess technically, if you want to go down that road, but more so Warzone, you have so many irons in the fire that it's hard to keep everything afloat. And in terms of kind of spreading it all out to make sure that there's enough attention put on all of them. And I think that's where Overwatch kind of falls in the cracks a little bit. And I think the biggest thing this game can do is maintain consistency, maintain a message, maintain this is what's going on, this is our plan for the game, this is our roadmap for the game. Because I think for so long, so many players who loved for a long time the transparency and the pomp and circumstance that Jeff Kaplan brought to the game, and being this front-facing, figure for so long, and kind of beating the drum for all the diehards too, especially during kind of the droughts with Overwatch, that I think that game, that's the biggest thing they need now, that it's kind of in this uncertainty where you could tell Jeff Kaplan did not want to make, and obviously we don't know for sure, but from my understanding, Jeff Kaplan did not want to make an Overwatch 2, and that probably played into why he was moving on to something else and leaving Blizzard. That, I hope that the biggest thing they take out of this is consistency. And it's hard to really talk about, too, with, like I said, with Overwatch 2. Like I said, this is much more of an update than a true standalone game. And because we haven't gotten the single-player campaign and things like that are going to come along with it. Or I shouldn't say single-player, but just campaign in general and things like that really, I guess, warrant, if you want to call it, the standalone 2 that is attached to it. But it right now feels like a fine-tuned version of Overwatch. There's not much more to say about that now. And like I said, I got to keep playing more of it. I got to get into it more, yada, yada. But I'm still very early. I only played a handful of games so far, just because life's been a little crazy on my end. But I also wanted to, and also too with, by the time I got into my account and this and that, but hopefully next week I should have a broader stroke, I guess, to be able to give on my thoughts with Overwatch. But anywho, moving on though. The other thing I guess I do want to talk about for what I've been playing, Molly and I got around to sitting down and actually finishing the Forgotten City. We sat down and played that. We only did play through it once, and we got a decent ending out of it. But my biggest thing that I think I brought this up on the show previously, the big thing that I really liked or really love about that game is the fact that you could still very much feel that this is originally started as a Skyrim mod. Like, I never played it back in the day, but I remember hearing a lot of people talk about the mod of this. That, people were recommending this over just Skyrim at times. But as somebody who's always been so in tune, and you guys know me, I'm a Bethesda stan, who's been so ingrained into that community that you couldn't help but not hear about it. It's so great to see what that's come from, to have its own standalone release, to have its own kind of time in the sun. Whether, and I think it does. Me personally, I'm not the biggest Roman in Greek guy, from setting and tone and whatnot. I'm not the biggest fan of that. And that's why I think I connect so much more now with the new iteration, or the new God of War duology. That's because they already did say that it's only going to be 2 games, but this chapter of God of War now, because I love Norse mythology. So when it comes to Greek mythology and things like that, and just the Roman, culture and whatnot, like, not the biggest fan of it. But it still was a great game. Still was fun to play through it. Like I said, for better and worse, you could definitely tell it's a Skyrim mod, but I could at one point, but there's some crossed eyes and things like that. But you forget about a lot of that stuff because the world is so engaging, and trying to find the ways to connect all the dots and move around, in terms of order of events. It's almost like, as somebody who has now been kind of going back to learn programming and things like that, like, it is very algorithmic, where you could feel and tell that you have to do things in a certain way at times, but while also reminding and referencing things previously to then provide more context. It's really interesting, the narrative design of this game and the way it's kind of pieced together. But yeah, we played through that. We had a great time with it. Wasn't necessarily blown away, but it still was. I think the story of this game and its development, to me, is really what kind of shines through and will always shine through, just because I am somebody who usually is very, like, I love the development of games. Obviously the positive side of it, but more so shining a light on that. But anywho, definitely go out and play. It's on Game Pass still. Go out. That's how we played it. Technically, I have it on PC, but we were kind of digging around on Game Pass what we should play one night, and I was like, fuck it, let's boot that up. So yeah, played through that. But outside of that, kind of circling back to something last week that I brought up, talking about, I finished my main quest line playthrough of Fallout 3 for the first time in a long time. And it's really evident that, to me at least, it's very evident going from Fallout 3 to 4 and seeing the evolution of not only open world games, but also Bethesda games and whatnot. I know why people don't like Fallout 4 comparative to 3, and obviously New Vegas is a different conversation considering it's Obsidian who developed that, but I understand why people don't like Fallout 4 over 3, but I always thought it was more, like, oh, it's because you haven't played it in a long time. It's because of, you have a little bit of nostalgic glasses on whenever you view that game and yada yada. And this is from somebody who fucking adores Oblivion as my favorite Elder Scrolls game. Going back and playing Fallout 3 for the first time in a long time, just because of all the issues that it had on PC in terms of with games for Windows Live, and now there being an official fix for that, and stuttering and things like that come along with using, because most people, at least PC side, like, who are, obviously balls deep into PC gaming like myself, like, you have a high refresh monitor and things like that. So a lot of people struggle with that, though, because that technology does not mesh well with the release of Fallout 3 for some reason. But booting that up and playing through that, it's very clear to me now that, I don't want to say, I was wrong, because I still like both games, and I just put it more on like, oh, I think it's because so many people have such a nostalgic feel for that game. That game holds up so fucking well, man. The writing in that game, it's just so goddamn good, man. I mean, it feels like a game that if you would have swapped the dialogue, maybe not the performances, obviously the performances, while still okay, but were still they were very Oblivion stiff at times. And that's no knock against writing or, it just, the animation, obviously coming from the Gamebryo engine, wasn't able to provide, technology just moves forward. It wasn't as cinematic of an experience. And that's obviously shown compared to Fallout 4. But if you would swap the dialogue and the writing from both games, I think people would, you could definitely just sit there and be like, yeah, it's still a modern Fallout. Yeah, it's still a great modern game. Like, but you'd very much be able to tell, like, this feels like a modern game. This could be, this was put out in 2020, you couldn't expect, like, you wouldn't second guess it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It made me even more excited for Starfield, which that's my most anticipated game of the year. That's always been, it's been my most anticipated game, period, will, until it comes out, is Elder Scrolls 6. But right below that is, it really is. I'm more excited for Starfield than Breath of the Wild 2, which is crazy. That just shows you how much I have a soft spot in my heart for Bethesda. That I am ready to see them try something new. I am ready to, I think they have I don't want to say they have a lot of pent up creative energy that they're going to be letting out for Starfield, or have been letting out on Starfield. But obviously, and they weren't necessarily the main only studio working on, Fallout 76 and whatnot. But I think it's been so long since they got, really 2015. That was when and Todd's even said that, hey, this is when we started working on Starfield, proper, that we really started, and it was right after Fallout 4 came out. So you want to talk about a game that is 7 years in the making? That's a long time for a studio that typically, kind of works in with how they're logistically set up for dev cycles. And at least this is how it was. But now that they have the bandwidth of so many studios, at least beforehand, the way that they started was they kind of had, it was a little bit of overlapping where they technically would have, it would be one team, but they would have groups almost, from my understanding of it, where say, hey, we're working on, let's just take Oblivion. Hey, we're working on Oblivion, and this is when they were still a little bit, Bethesda was still smaller. Working on Oblivion, cool. Oblivion's, coming out in 3 months, 4 months, something like that. I mean, it was 3 to 6 months. Hey, we're going to start and splinter off a group, maybe a third of the team to start working on pre-production. And that's when they got the Fallout license, or that's when they bought the Fallout IP and whatnot. Cool, we're going to start working on that. So then it's kind of, once everyone kind of finishes up with development proper on Oblivion, they move on to Fallout. And then the same deal when Fallout's getting ready to go, boom. Skyrim was already in pre-production at that point, but then you take the smaller portion of the team, start on a little bit closer to production, and then ramp right into, dev proper and whatnot. And now that they have so many, they have multiple actual Bethesda game studio, like BGS proper studios in, Rockville, Austin, Montreal, like they could handle that a little bit better to then say, okay, cool, we can maybe tune up our dev cycle. But you got to think too, like for them to, we're talking about a proper single player open world RPG. It's been 7 years. By knock on wood, this game comes out, in a good way. It comes out in November this year. That's a long fucking time, man. That's a long time to spend on anything in your life. Anything. Let alone one fucking game. Like, that's a long fucking time, man. I mean, so when I say they have a lot of pent-up creativity, I think when we're talking about a game that they've been wanting to make and game that they've been ready to make, and I think this was really that, and Todd's talked about it in interviews before, of like, it was kind of the, okay, if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? Like, if not now, when kind of thing, because we're, I think Elder Scrolls 6 will be his magnum opus, like in terms of, or his, last hurrah. I think he'll ride off into the sunset after that, because we're talking about a game that'll probably be out at the earliest 2025. 24 to 25. I think that is very, 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 very soon, if that's the case. But I think that's if everything goes excellent, perfectly with Starfield, the polish cycle and getting this game to go gold and whatnot. Like, outside of that, I don't see this game coming out for another 3 years at the earliest, personally. Possibly 2, but I think 25, 26 potentially is when we could see it. But that's a long fucking time to have just this one game in development that and obviously, Elder Scrolls is a different beast to itself, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, from just making a single player open world RPG that they are known for making, it's been a long fucking time. So a lot of this has me super excited, even more excited for Starfield. I'm so hyped for this fucking game, man. Like, I'm ready to see what Bethesda makes for that. And obviously, like, this just has kind of filtered into my, just another thing I could check off of. Hey, I'm replaying all of the, Bethesda Game Studios proper, like, releases leading up to Starfield, just replaying them, some going through 100%ing them, yada yada. But yeah, playing through Fallout 3, man, it just got me. If they're able to provide, from what it sounds like they are doing, so many of these where they're going to kind of go back to their roots a little bit with some of their classical and traditional RPG elements, and apply that to the ambiance and atmosphere of space, I think there could be something incredibly special with this game. I know I fully am, as like I said, as somebody who has been a Bethesda fan and a Bethesda stan for so long. Maybe it's because I have my expectations in check, but I feel very comfortable going into this game what I can expect, knowing their previous releases and knowing that this game is going to have bugs. It is, no matter what. I mean, any large open world game is going to have bugs. Fuck, look at Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West. I haven't finished it yet, but fucking fantastic game. Had a lot of bugs at launch because it's a huge fucking open world that you're playing in. Like, look at Assassin's Creed titles. I love the newer iterations of Assassin's Creed and the new formula with that, the open world RPG formula of it. Tons of fucking bugs, like, especially towards launch. Like, it happens. The Witcher 3, one of my favorite games of all time. Tons of fucking bugs closer to its launch. Like, that game did not get fixed for a while. So it happens. Like, with worlds that big and the amount of code that goes into that, and the amount of large-scale assets that are all being pulled and rendered at the same time, the fact that these games come out and work as great as they do when they release should be a fucking achievement unto themselves. And I think more people need to kind of think that way about it, personally. But anywho, yeah, Fallout 3 is fucking fantastic playing through that again. I'm excited to continue my romp through Fallout, the Bethesda catalog as we're getting close to Starfield again. It just reminds me all the reasons why they're one of, if not my favorite game studio out there. Or really entity, I guess. Because I love all the stuff of their partners now. And them now in the fold with Microsoft, it's all positive stuff to me. But anywho, that's a long-winded thing of, hey, this is what I've been playing. Like I said, there's not much going on this week. But I wanted to give my thoughts, my initial first thoughts on the Overwatch 2 beta. I'll have more on that next week. But just kind of looking around the few things in the industry, I'm not going to talk, I don't think we're going to talk about it really until next week. Not that there's really much to talk about. But Microsoft did announce that, yes, they are obviously officially announced, hey, we're doing yet again another Xbox game showcase this summer, and we're going to be, their E3 conference is basically what they're doing. Like, that's their E3 conference. They were basically just confirming it, which, cool, we all expected it. But I think, too, just kind of sticking with Bethesda as well, like, this did confirm, though, that, hey, they are kind of what Jeff Grubb mentioned previously, that, hey, they are sticking with kind of sharing the namespace with Bethesda yet again, because they are referring to it as the Xbox and Bethesda game showcase. So, and Jeff's kind of previously mentioned, like, they're going to stick with that for a little bit. He said potentially this could be the last year we see that, but he was like, they're going to kind of lean on that just for a little bit until the dust settles from this. And any multi-billion dollar deal, especially like Activision went on, like, any multi-billion dollar deal is going to take time to settle. Like, it is really going to take time to settle. So to me, that makes a ton of sense still. But I think this may be the last year we see that. But like I said, next week we'll kind of talk about this because I want to get Mike's thoughts on it too. And I kind of want to get what he kind of thinks and whatnot. Because outside of, I think this is obviously when we're going to get the deep dive on Starfield. And we're going to see the curtain finally pulled back on it. Where we'll see the Fallout 4 reveal of this and what it means. And granted, we've slowly been getting the, or not even slowly, they've actually been really consistent with it. The kind of lore pieces and little info grabs that Bethesda has been putting out, and the dev diaries that they've also put out on it. But we haven't seen gameplay. We've seen one snippet of gameplay. We've seen the teaser trailer that we got last year that showed, the in-engine footage. Actually, I believe that might be alpha footage that they did show. I'm just curious for myself now. And fuck it, I'm all you got, so you gotta fucking you gotta just chill with me. So let me pull it up. Starfield trailer. Oops. Let me see, because it pops out. Yeah, alpha in-game footage. I'm sorry. I thought it was just in-engine footage, but no, this is in-game footage. Obviously from the Creation Engine 2. So I think this is the first time we will get true proper gameplay footage, obviously, from it. We'll get the deep dive, we'll get the curtain pull back on that. But also, too, we have to keep in mind that Redfall is coming out supposedly still this year. And that was the next release from Arcane. Yeah, Arcane. Yeah. The like monster vampire hunting game. That looks dope. That's supposed to come out this year. So who knows when that is going to come out this year. So, and obviously too, not to mention just from Bethesda, but also, you know, from on the Xbox side, are we going to see, obviously we're probably going to see more of Fable 2, Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga, but also State of Decay potentially, but two that I'm kind of really actually thinking about. Fable, do we finally see something from Playground Games on the Fable reboot? Like even just a little bit? And then two, do we finally get a look at Avowed from Obsidian? Because that I've heard is a little bit closer than people think. I thought that was more, when they announced that in 2020, I thought, to be honest, that was more of a 2025 game, if I'm being honest, like that far out. But the more I've heard about it, the more that we could potentially get a decent look at it this year with even a release like mid 2023. So, who knows? But obviously that could timeline change and whatnot. But that I'm interested in checking out and kind of seeing if, or keeping in mind as we kind of head towards that. Those are the two that I really do want to see hopefully see something from that isn't the, you know, hey, stuff we really know about. We know about them, but we don't really know about it. It's almost like Starfield. Like we know some about them, and granted, we know a little bit more about Starfield, obviously, but we haven't seen true proper gameplay for that, anything like that. Like, you know, I'm ready to see a little bit of the curtain pulled, just a little bit. Let me get a little decent look at that. So obviously excited about that and whatnot. And then two, like I mentioned, also with when I was kind of going through and rambling through about everything, and I mentioned the Activision Blizzard acquisition from Xbox. There was actually a little bit of an update from that. This comes from Rebecca Valentine over at IGN. As always, link in the description. She's done great work for a long time over at US Gamer, and then now obviously at IGN as their news go-to. So as always, like I said, link in the description. Go over there, give Rebecca a click. She's great. Activision Blizzard shareholders voted today to approve the company's pending acquisition by Microsoft, but that doesn't mean it's a done deal, with several other hurdles remaining. Announced via press release today, over 98% of shares voted in favor of the acquisition, which is expected to close sometime in the upcoming Microsoft fiscal year, which is between July 2022 and June of 2023. The voters approved the acquisition at $95 per share, considerably higher than the share price of late, which has been slowly dropping over the last month from the low $80 range and has been hovering between $76 and $77 per share for the last few days. The lowering share price ahead of the deal could indicate a lack of shareholder confidence that the deal will ultimately pass. Though the vote was overwhelming, a number of other possible challenges lie between now and the ultimate conclusion of the deal. One key hurdle is the likelihood of an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. Lena Khan, its recently appointed head, has already shown a willingness to tackle big tech antitrust issues, including blocking an NVIDIA acquisition and reopening the case against Meta. The deal will also require regulatory approval abroad, including in China. and then it goes on to talk a little bit about the the turbulence that we've talked about a ton on the show before, regarding the shitty things that have happened at Activision with Bobby Kotick and J. Allen Brack and whatnot. But kind of focusing on the deal end of this, I definitely agree with what Rebecca's saying, that this isn't a shut and done thing, and I think more people need to be aware of that, and not that, hey, Xbox owns Xbox owns Activision and Blizzard right now. They don't, and they won't for a little while, and hopefully they do, because of all this. I don't think we'll see as much. I don't think this will be as much of a, like, I don't think the FTC is going to have as much of an iron fist on this one. I always look at if Disney could buy Fox and that go through, and the amount of cultural pull that Fox has had for a long time on, and I'm not a Fox dude. I fucking am not a Fox guy in general. But the amount of pull they've had in the entertainment world and pop culture and just cultural impact in general, if that can be approved, anything can be approved. Or that's not, like, this isn't a monopoly deal. It really isn't. If you look at the NVIDIA acquisition and whatnot, that's a little bit different because we're talking about such a much more niche thing in terms of the semiconductor chip merger that was going to happen. That is a little bit more of a niche product. When we're talking about the grand scale of entertainment out there, this isn't necessarily entertainment for an industry, or monopoly for an industry. I wouldn't think that, because Sony is going to be doing the same thing. And people are going to expect that to go through. And it's just, to me, this is not, it's a big fucking deal, but it's not, I wouldn't see this being, I don't see this being the straw that breaks the camel's back. I don't see this being the one, personally, but that could always change. There's absolutely a chance that this doesn't go through and it was all for naught, and now they got to go back to the drawing board and whatnot. But I think this is a deal that people want to have happen. I think this is a deal that, for a publicly traded company that needs to have its fucking bell rung and clock cleaned, and kind of set back on the straight and narrow. And, I think Microsoft buying them is the biggest win for them yet. And being able to reshape kind of that image that is gone into Activision Blizzard, and cleaning house eventually. And you get what I mean, where shit needs to fucking change there. So, and I mean that in the way of, take games out of it from a from a standpoint of humans and people and all that. Like, shit needs to fucking change. And I think obviously that doesn't always go into it or whatnot, but to me, this is going to be one of those things that I just don't see this being hung up with. It'll get investigated by all means, but I don't see this being something that is completely hung up, or we're going to see the potential of this deal not going through in some way, shape, or form. So outside of that, guys, I mean, like I said, kind of a last minute thing, not a lot of news too. It was kind of perfect storm, with Mike, obviously, something coming up and him not being able to do the show last second. We'll all be back together next week again, and it'll be a little bit deeper of a conversation to have, but I at least wanted to obviously get on and talk to everyone and just see how everyone's doing and share the thoughts from around the industry that I have and whatnot, and the hype that I have for obviously Starfield and talking about that. But yeah, I think that's about it, guys. So as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including at Travelus _ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_. You could also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Travelus_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some video games with me, you can do so over at Regular Travless, Travless, on Xbox Live, or really any platform in general, Steam, PlayStation Network. I need to give you my Switch code, but I can do that too. Ubisoft, Battle.net, all that jazz. You get what I'm saying. But with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for our show this week. So thank you everyone so much for coming through and listening, sharing, and being part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors, Black Lives Matter. And both Mike and I will see you next week.